Welcome back to another episode of One on One with Courtney Starks. And we are live with Natalie Norfus, the owner of the Norfus Firm and the host of, first of all, this is creative. What's the Deal podcast, spelled DEIL. At first, I kept saying, what's the DEIL podcast? What is that even supposed to mean? Yeah, I love it. First, it's so
Thank you.
creative. So before we start, just tell the people a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here. I am a DEI and HR expert. Our firm solves people problems. We get to work with workforces all around the world in many different industries. So I would say a really cool part about what I do is I get to see the workplace from many different perspectives. So it allows us to really come in with some impactful solutions.
So for those people who may not know what DEI is, can you explain it to us?
Oh, absolutely. This is such a great question. We've been talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we actually have been spending a lot of time sort of differentiating between what it is and isn't. People who know me know I love the dictionary. And so if we look at the dictionary definition of diversity, it's being composed of differing elements. So when you apply that out in real life, all of us have some form of diversity, right? Whether it's the language you speak, where you were born, are you an only child, do you have siblings, right? We're all coming to the table with it. When it comes to the conversation we're having, diversity is usually talked about in the folks who aren't represented in the workplace. And that's where a lot of the work is how do we get those marginalized or underrepresented folks, a seat at the table. Equity deals with fairness. And sometimes people, conflate equity with equality. So they would say, if we have $10, you get $5, I get $5, that's equal. Equity is more about fairness. Maybe there's a reason why I get $750 and you get $250. Maybe I have more experience, maybe whatever the case may be but it gets down to, are there obstacles in your way for having a fair access to opportunities? So equity is about fair access, fair opportunities, fair processes.
Yes.
And inclusion is the actions that leaders take to help people feel like they belong in an organization. So of all of those words, inclusion is the active one, the behaviors that I engage in to make sure that you know that you're valued and you're welcomed here in this workplace.
Yeah. In mentioning the workplace, right? How and why is it so important to have DEI? I know I'm thinking in my mind, all of these years back when segregation and slavery was a thing, that wasn't something we were talking about. But now more so than ever, this conversation has been heightened for a plethora of reasons. But now, speaking in the now in 2023, why do you believe it's so much more important now to talk about this and have that in the workplace?
Well, there's multiple reasons. Number one, you get better results when you have a lot of different thoughts involved. You get better results when people can come in and say, where I grew up, it's this, or I tried this somewhere else, or, if we're talking about a certain demographic, I have X lived experience or whatever experience. Like, there is a ton of research out there that tells us when you have diversity of thought and background, perspective, ethnicity, gender, you just get better results. Companies make more money. So if you don't realize out of the goodness of your heart, like a lot of us do, that we should all have a chance to succeed, and you care about money, the numbers are there, that having diversity and making people feel like they're a part of an organization leads to better business results. That's first. Secondly, if you look around, and I think social media has given us an opportunity to see all the differences out there in the world. And we're getting much better at being able to say none of us are one thing, right? I'm not just a woman. I'm not just Black. I'm not just a mother. Like, I'm a lot of different components. And so when we start to understand, like, hey, you can't box us all Black people are not the same, all women are not the same. When you realize that, it allows actually for greater connectivity. I always say that because at the end of the day, we all have a lot more in common than we think. And I think that because unfortunately in the US, everybody has to fit a box, right? We're always checking boxes on forms. I think we're getting to a place where people are like, no, we're more than that box. And I feel like when you are able to find sort of that interconnectivity and what you have in common with people, then we can even do more, right?
Yes.
Then we can actually get into these tough conversations of, well, you know, Corey, why do you get upset if a white woman holds her purse when you walk by? Right. You can have those conversations if you've built some trust around the fact that none of us are one thing.
Right.
And there's going to be something about the many things we are that we have in common.
Yeah. You know, and in these three, you mentioned inclusion being the action. And I feel like, and I know I'm probably going to step on some toes here, but I do it every time I have these conversations. That's the thing that gets lost.
Yes.
The inclusion of it all, right? Because you were saying we are many things. Just because we come from one cultural background, we are not the same. And I think that's the part that gets lost, right? So when you talk about inclusion, why do you feel like that's the struggle piece of kind of piecing it all together?
Well, you know, because people don't realize that these things take practice, right? Okay, I said I believe in it. I'm giving you a budget for it. What else do you want from me? Well, when we work with leaders, which we do a lot, which is why we created What's the Deal, right? Because we see regularly leaders struggling on like how to do this work. Because look, we live in a very litigious society, so people don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to get sued. Okay, cool. I'm like, but put that to the side because I'd rather get sued knowing that you're being authentic and you're approaching folks. And I'm an employment lawyer, so most lawyers don't just say get yourself sued, but it's more like you probably won't get sued if you're authentic and you're showing up. But it takes practice, right? It's not I come and ask you how you're doing and you tell me a little bit and then it's done. Right. One conversation doesn't allow you and I to build trust. Trust is something that's built over time. So we talk a lot to leaders, like it's like working out, right? I talk about this a lot. I really, truly would love to work out once, eat one salad and be right there at the weight and the physique I'm looking for, but that's not how it works. And if we think about the underrepresentation issue, right, that we're not seeing enough Black, brown women, others in higher level positions, none of these things happened overnight.
Yes.
So to think that you could have one conversation or write a statement or say you support it and that be enough, I think that's where the mistakes are made, is that and it's not even so much that people don't want to do it, they just don't know what they're supposed to do, which also gets at, we talk a lot about, you have to have an expert in the room in this stuff and not just plop it in the seat of underrepresented folks and thinks that their lived experience is enough to carry it through. It's much deeper than that. It helps, but it's much deeper than that. So I think, you know, that's where and people get frustrated, right? Because it's like they say they care, but they don't show they care. And
you know something, you said something and it was so it just triggered something in me. Throwing it in the laps of somebody just because they're the person of color. Hey, you can handle this. I remember going to a place, and I'm not going to name the name of the organization, but I was invited. I didn't realize why I was being invited, right? I thought, oh, they're probably awarding the company for doing something great. And when I got there and I realized I was the only one in the room because I was that, it bothered me because I kept saying, do we not get it yet? When we're talking about DEI, do we not really understand what this means? And the fact that you threw it in my lap just because, it's not okay. You know what I mean?
Well, and we regularly tell clients, I mean, multiple times even this week, if you want to put together a DEI council, right, where different employees can come and weigh in, amazing, but it shouldn't be on top of their job.
Right.
It should be that we're carving out 8 to 10 hours a month, and this is part of your job. Their supervisors know that in addition to the job that they were hired for, a couple hours a week, they're going to be doing work for a council, sometimes more, sometimes less, because it shouldn't be volunteer work, right? Like, I think that also gets at the orientation some folks have around DEI. When we talk about DEI, it just needs to be overlaid in everything you do as a business. And why so many people, so many companies have failed is they keep it off to the side. And they're like, we need a DEI strategy. And I'm like, you need DEI overlaid on your business strategy, right? So if we think about the fact of hey, we really seem to, if you're a big company and use outside law firms, we really seem to use the same law firms over and over. Like this, are we really getting the best service that way? Are we getting different perspectives? Then you would have a vetting process.
Yeah.
That means that you're going out and you're looking for all of the people that everywhere you can for the best lawyers possible, casting a wide net so you can get back a slate that's diverse in perspective and background and all these different things. That's not like we need to have a whole separate program to make sure we get diverse vendors, because in the end, it doesn't get people where they want to be. Until people operationalize, integrate DEI, it's not going to breathe. It doesn't have room to breathe.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other piece of this. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have.
Yeah.
If you, and especially like we talk to clients a lot where it's like, if you're in a service organization, like you provide like legal services or whatever the case may be, clients care, they're asking, don't bring me the one Black person and not put them on my case. Bring me someone who can be on, like whoever the people are, bring people who can work on these cases. Like it's not enough for me to see Black and brown faces. Or people who seem to appear to be a woman, for example. No, I want those different views on my cases. So I think it's just people really needing to understand their why, which we work with clients on. Why are you doing this? Why is it relevant? How does it tie to your business strategy? Is your business strategy, right? And then like those pieces, I think, are a big part of why we still get this tokenism. Oh, look, we have. And it's like, the thing I will tell you is that, you know, we talk a lot about the intergenerational workplaces, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch with like Gen Zers, because they don't care. So they're going to always come for like, oh, is it because, are you saying this because, you know, and I applaud that, because I didn't have that level of courage when I was in my 20s, but, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, alongside the workplace, you know, schools and universities also spend money on these DEI programs. So, can you tell us what are some examples of how DEI works in our school system?
So, you know, it's interesting. I think it's called a lot of different things. And obviously I'm in a state that's not loving that right now.
Right.
And it's fascinating because it just kind of felt like it was out of nowhere, because there was no one in Florida regularly saying, you know, this DEI stuff is terrible. But in terms of like, I can give an example for me. Like my son, when he was in 4th grade, he was talking about, he had a classmate who was from South Asia who felt picked on because he's Sikh and wore a turban, and his food was different than everyone else. And I was able to arrange with their principal to do an unconscious bias training, but at a 4th, like, you know, for 4th graders. And it's really fascinating because a lot of children that I run into actually seem to already know a lot about these things. And it does show like it's sort of what you teach. But I think, again, it's like, you know, my son goes to an arts school, so sometimes it's woven in and some of the stuff that they learn sort of more artistically. But I don't know that there's really a unified approach yet, which honestly, you know, if we were taking it, peeling it even back past the acronym, it's sort of like, how do we respect one another even when we're different, which I feel like a lot of us learned in like kindergarten. And I think that we, like, as a whole, not just in the education, not just in the education system, but as a society, we really need more of how do we respect one another, even when we have different views and perspectives.
So you mentioned something right before you said this about your guy out there, DeSantis.
I love how folks always be trying to put people on people. Like my cousin and I would be like, your uncle. Your uncle too. What you talking about?
He has this back bill to eliminate the DEI programs and, you know, in the schools and in the systems and whatever the case may be. For you, why do you think this is a thing for him? Why is he because I feel like he's going harder than I've ever seen about eliminating, you know, history, specifically ours, as well as trying to get rid of DEI as if it's meaningless. For me, what do you feel like how do you feel like it's going to harm us as a community and as we progress on down the years?
Well, so that's a multifaceted question. So I'm going to touch just a few things. First things first, while I'm not like super into politics, it seems to me part of it is that he's overreaching for a base he thinks he needs for his presidential election, right? So, I mean, there's that piece.
Yeah.
In terms of the approach, I find it mind-boggling from a business perspective, because if you think about, for example, just the fight he has with Disney. Disney's one of the largest employers in the state.
Yeah.
They're one of the largest publicly held companies in the world. They have a huge DEI program. So they're not going to not do their DEI program.
Right.
Are you trying to deter business from the state? Right. So to me, just again, being in this for as long as I have, I always have to go to the business part first, because I'm like, well, what would be a good business reason for this approach? And I have yet to find one. I mean, the approach he's taking seems very anti-business, which that to me is just bizarre. I also think the other piece, and again, this is the lawyer in me, is that people don't always get to hear as much, that a lot of these actions are usually end up getting enjoined because they're not legal. So like the law that was first put out was that Stop Woke Act. Well, that was enjoined over a year ago or about a year ago. And so it's not in effect.
Yes.
So you're looking at some of these things where it becomes this propaganda. And in terms of how it could harm marginalized communities, I think it really remains to be seen, because I don't think many big companies are really doing much different. Like people aren't just afraid and they're not just stopping doing the work. But I think it does create a ridiculous amount of unneeded fear. And we already live in fear. And so then you tack that on to sort of the collective psyche of marginalized folks and just constantly having to fight for your existence. You know, that piece, I would imagine, psychologists will have to study down the road. And I pray that we're in a place where we're not getting to where we're living in this fear for much longer, but I don't have a crystal ball there.
Yeah. And because he's banning it, out of schools and universities, how harmful is it to minority groups?
Oh, I would say it sends a really ridiculous message, because it's saying, we don't want to see you, right? And from my perspective, look, we want to be, when you think about marginalized group, underrepresented groups, we want to be in places where we're seen. We don't want to and so we don't want to keep trying to force that's why a lot of us make our own tables, right? That whole analogy, I'll go make my own, because it's like, there's just no more room for constantly feeling like you have to justify your existence. And so I think about that too, from a business standpoint. So you're willing to give up lots of tuition dollars over a platform that no one really understands where this came from. I mean, I don't know how much you've seen, but I mean, he's getting clowned by other Republicans, like this is too far, and like, why fight with Disney, and all of these things. So it's like, but in the meantime, we still have to live every day and be like, is it today going to be the day? I mean, like, just if you think about the law that was recently passed, where employers have to do E-Verify, which will eradicate a lot of undocumented labor. Now, I'm not saying, oh, everybody should operate off of undocumented labor, because a lot of times that group gets taken advantage of, and there has to be better answers. But I mean, people are leaving the state in scores because they don't want to get, go through removal proceedings and be, kicked out of the country. And it's like, then now you're seeing these politicians like, tell your people don't leave. Why did you vote for this? You know what I mean? So it's like, you can see sort of the fear mongering it's causing, but I think it very much overlooks the fact that we're not in times where we don't have access to information. So these types of approaches might have worked 50 or 60 years ago. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have easy ways to connect. If you took books out of a library, that was kind of like, how do we get information? Now we pick up our phones. You could know what's going on anywhere in the world at any given moment. So you can't, and that's the last piece I say about this often, is the diversity is here. And if people want to know about different cultures, they can do it on their phone. They can also go to another state that hasn't banned it in their universities. And that takes away the opportunities, and that creates these brain drains where these brilliant professors leave the state. And it's like, there'll be consequences there.
Yeah, yeah. Let's speak a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah.
What's the deal? Once again, guys, it's a play on DEI. So it was really, really cool to kind of see that. So when did you bring this to life, and why was it important for you to spread this awareness?
We found that project after project, consistently, that the potential for success or failure depended completely on senior leaders in an organization. We're very data driven. Like, we love the numbers, the data, and even qualitative. Like, I'm interviewing people. We always use our coding, like a data coding system, so we can get to just what are the facts here.
Yeah.
And as I sort of alluded to earlier, we also found consistently that even supportive leaders were stuck on like how to execute. So we were like, we need something that speaks to leaders, that tells them in 15 to 20 minutes per episode, what can you be doing now without waiting for someone to tell you? And this is what we do regularly with our clients as well. But like, what are some specific actions that you can take? We look at the top issues that we see as trends coming up, and make sure that each of the episodes gives someone like, well, what do you do when there's so many different issues, right?
Yes.
We're dealing with transgender issues right now. We're dealing with women's issues. We know Black issues are always on the table because the country cannot seem to get it right. And so that can be overwhelming because you can't be an expert in everything out there and run a company.
Yes.
No one's asking you to, right? Because there's certain practices that you can take that are easy and practical and like helping sort of leaders get out of the mud. It also gives us the opportunity to share different perspectives on these issues. We did an allyship series that was five episodes because I was like, you know what? We have to like elevate what people think about allyship, because a lot of times allies center themselves and they think they know what you need.
Right.
And I'm like, we need a series where we ask people what they need from very different backgrounds. We had a white woman who's a partner at a big firm, a Black woman who came to the US from Nigeria by herself at 16, a queer Asian man who heads up an arts, like a mix. So it's like, we all need something different. And it's really not that hard to ask the person, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you out? When I hear people say that to me, I'm like, you all right with me, right? Because you're not coming at it from yourself, you're coming at it from, helping the other. So that was our approach. We have a lot of fun. We're just.
It seems like it's definitely a good time. It is that, and it opens up so many opportunities, right? For learning and education, but also to learn about yourself. Like you were saying, there are some times you gotta check yourself.
Absolutely.
You're the one.
Included.
You're the one. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I get opportunities to guest lecture in an HR course at a university here. And I talk a lot about, and part of why I lecture is how do you avoid bias when you're doing internal investigations. And I gave an example of like where I had to check I always try to go in very open-minded when I do HR investigations, because it's like a soap opera, right? You think you know the story and then 20 other things happen. And I had a complaint come in where I was reading it, but it was like one long paragraph, and I love to write. And I'm like, where are the periods? Where are the comments? And I found myself trying to correct it. And I'm like, oh, no. You can't be making judgments on this person's intellect or stop, right? Then I stopped, I walked away, I came back and I read it clean. What was this person claiming? That's all I needed to be trying to figure out. So we all have bias. That's not the issue. It's how you work with your bias, how you address it. So
I definitely love that. Natalie, I thank you for your time. This was really great. It opened up some things in my mind, because I was like, I know I'm like that sometimes, and you don't realize it, because like you said, you're just operating. And sometimes you don't take that time, like you did, to stop and then go back.
Right.
You like, a lot of us like to operate in the now. Like, I want to take care of this right now. It got to be solved right now. But the reality is it doesn't. It doesn't.
We'll just start. We can end with, there's a power in pausing.
Come on.
Even if it's just 20 seconds. So, and I appreciate you having me. I love this conversation.
You're welcome. How can people tap in and find you and be a part of your community?
thenorfusfirm.com. at the Norfus Firm on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook under the Norfus Firm. What's the Deal is on YouTube, so you can see us talking about it, and we're on every podcast player, so you can listen to us talking about it. Thank you.
Man, thank you so much, everybody. This is Natalie Norfus. Please make sure you are following her just because I said so. She is now a part of the family, and Natalie, you're welcome back here any time.
Thank you.
This is the last episode of the night. So I thank you all for tuning in to all three. I love you for watching. I am Courtney Starks, and this is One on One with Courtney Starks. Have a good night.